Throughout this country's great history, across 2 world wars, a Cold War, the Korean conflict, Vietnam, and the post-9/11 era, the brave men and women of the U.S. military have served with honor and with valor. Since its founding in 1981, the National Veterans Legal Services Program has worked tirelessly on behalf of millions of veterans to secure the benefits to which they are entitled. In our more than 40 years, NVLSP has worked to ensure our nation's commitment to all veterans. Enduring valor, honoring veterans from all eras. This year we commemorate the 80th anniversary of D-Day and the 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War. Our nation's promise to care for military veterans and their families is intended to be ironclad and lifelong, regardless of where or when they served. During World War II, Army Staff Sergeant Alvin Sperling was shot in the leg by German troops in France in July of 1944, captured and taken prisoner. Sperling was put into a wheelbarrow, thrown into the back of a truck, and taken to a German prisoner of war camp in the town of Rennes. Sergeant Sperling received only minimal care. When Allied forces recaptured the town, Sperling was freed and flown to Walter Reed Medical Center for treatment of his catastrophic injuries. At his family's request in 2013, NVLSP took on his case. Our individual representation program reviewed the War Heroes Benefit Awards from the Veterans Administration and secured for him the highest possible level of benefits. Mr. Sperling passed away in 2014 at the age of 93. Jerry Gustafson, who saw action in 3 combat theaters over 3 decades, was another veteran for whom NVLSP has successfully advocated.
I served in the U.S. Army Infantry from 1 July 1943 until I retired on 30 April 1964. I left for Korea the end of December of 1950, and I went to Vietnam in December of '62.
NVLSP's Niemer team noticed an error. The VA was withholding a portion of Gustafson's disability pay. NVLSP pursued correction of the error with the VA, which clarified that a portion of the withheld money should be released to Mr. Gustafson. NVLSP secured Mr. Gustafson's military retirement pay and service-connected disability payments. Mr. Gustafson passed away in October 2024 at the age of 103. Like many young Americans, Taro Katagiri had 2 objectives when he volunteered for military service in 1945.
He came from a poor family in the San Joaquin Valley in California, and it was just his opportunity because he couldn't afford to go to college, and so that was just an opportunity for him to have a career. And also, he really loved the United States. He really loved his country, and he wanted to serve the country.
Remarkably, Mr. Katagiri's 30-year career in the U.S. Army began only after he had been released from a Japanese-American internment camp in Arizona. Mr. Katagiri fought in Korea and Vietnam, rising to the rank of colonel before transitioning to civilian life in 1974. It was during his deployment to Vietnam that Mr. Katagiri was exposed to Agent Orange. That widely used, highly toxic herbicide is presumed to have caused the bladder cancer that caused his death in 1997. Unbeknownst to his family, Mr. Katagiri had made arrangements to provide for his family after his passing.
I had no idea this was going on. He had apparently arranged for a family friend to help her to file the DIC benefits, and also, in addition, to get contact his doctor to get a letter from the doctor stating that his bladder cancer was a result of his exposure to Agent Orange. She applied 3 months after my father's death, for the DIC benefits, and she got no reply.
Mr. Caregiver served boots on the ground in the Republic of Vietnam, and he had presumptive exposure to Agent Orange. Yet, when the VA initially granted the service connection cause of death, meaning they didn't look at the Niemer body of law when determining what the proper effective date should be.
In less than a year, NVLSP secured decades' worth of back benefits for Mr. Caregiver's wife, Sonoko.
My mother, she's 92 years old. She's going to be 93 in 2 weeks. And I'm just really particularly grateful that she was able to get the benefit while she's still living. My mother and I are so grateful from the bottom of our hearts of all the wonderful work the organization has done. Without NVLSP, this would not be possible at all.
Susie and her mother are proud to have honored the memory of their father and husband, who expressed his pride of service in a college paper.
It is because someone had doubted my loyalty 2 decades ago that I feel honored to have the trust placed in me to uphold and protect the American Constitution. Yes, proud indeed I was when I received a paper from the Secretary of the Army saying, "The President of the United States of America reposing special trust and confidence in the patriotism of Taro Katagiri, I do appoint him Second Lieutenant, Armor, Regular Army, in the Army of the United States."
The 9/11 attacks compelled a new era and brought with it new perils for those who defended our nation. Veterans returning from deployments in the Persian Gulf and Southwest Asia began suffering from a host of illnesses.
The VA has always had a tough time handling claims that are related to exposures that service members have to toxic substances. And we started our history focusing on Agent Orange and what that did to Vietnam veterans. And we were very successful in a class action that got them billions of dollars in compensation. Burn pits, the fumes from them, are the Agent Orange of the post-9/11 service members. Burn pits were used instead of incinerators in Southwest Asia, spewing toxic fumes on the bases in Southwest Asia where all our troops were housed. And that has caused tremendous problems.
Many of the diseases, cancers, and respiratory ailments suffered by those troops were not recognized as service-connected by the VA.
In many PACT Act claims, it's easy to win because Congress has specified about 24 different types of diseases, cancers, respiratory illnesses that should be considered service-connected by people who are exposed, and it defined who is exposed. Those cases are easy to win. We focus on claims that are more difficult, that the illnesses are not on the list of diseases identified by Congress in the PACT Act.
NVLSP established its Burn Pits Claims Assistance Program in 2021. Terry Lane followed his father's footsteps into the Navy and served post-9/11 as a laboratory manager and healthcare administrator stationed at Lemonnier Camp in East Africa.
He had served in Djibouti in the early 2000s, and while in Djibouti, he had been exposed to burn pits. So Mr. Lane served around these toxic chemicals, these toxic fumes, and later he developed prostate cancer. But he was having a difficult time getting the VA to recognize that his prostate cancer was related to those toxic exposures that he experienced in service. We helped Mr. Lane craft a medical opinion in coordination with his private doctor that was phrased and structured in the most effective way we could think of to get these claims granted.
Finally, in 2022, the VA recognized the service connection of Mr. Lane's conditions and awarded him full benefits. Army Lieutenant Colonel Joshua Leone carried on a long family legacy of service when he was commissioned into the Army from the U.S. Military Academy at West Point in 2006. His first overseas deployment was to Iraq in 2007, the second to Afghanistan in 2011 with the 1st Armored Division.
I was a battery commander, and one of the missions that my battery took on while we were in Afghanistan was we inherited a route clearance platoon, which are actually engineers. So I had a platoon of engineers in my artillery battery. And I went on patrol with them, and the area that we were working in was basically one road in, one road out. And the adversaries in the area knew that, and they mined it with IEDs. So we went into the Chalk Valley was the name of the location, and the vehicle I was in was hit with an improvised explosive device, an IED. Took the vehicle, rolled it on its side, and flipped it backwards. No one was killed, but everybody was pretty seriously hurt. The injuries were, both of my ankles were broken, my lower back, my cervical, thoracic, and lumbar spine were all fractured. I had to have a spinal fusion to put together the lower part of my L4, L5, and S1. My right thumb was broken, and so after the initial injury, I was pretty much casted, so neck and back, both of my legs. Also a traumatic brain injury. I was transported to our brigade medical facility, and then to Bagram Airfield, then to Landstuhl, and then back to Booker Army Medical Center at Fort Sam Houston, where I spent a few weeks and underwent a couple surgeries there.
Throughout Josh's months-long recovery and physical rehabilitation period, his wife Michelle was his primary caregiver, sometimes literally carrying him to appointments while tending to their growing family. Toward the end of his recovery at Fort Bliss, Josh applied for caregiver benefits under the Service Members Group Life Insurance Traumatic Injury Protection Program, known as TSGLI.
He applied for benefits and his claim was denied. So the benefits specifically that he was seeking under the TSGLI program, the way this is structured is that if you require caregiving in order to perform basic activities of daily living, then you can receive benefits ranging from $25,000 to $100,000 based on how long you require care. So he filed a claim for over 120 days of the caregiving that he required, and the Army denied his claim.
NVLSP's pro bono law firm partner, Wilmer Hale, joined as co-counsel and appealed the decision.
Josh, after submitting his initial TSGLI claim, received a partial denial that said he would get 25%, I believe, of the maximum amount of TSGLI benefits. That was back in 2012 or so. And then, when we submitted his appeal, he promptly got back, which was surprising, an approval letter that said he would get the full amount of his benefits. And then beyond that, he felt like he righted the wrong that had happened those many years ago.
The successful appeal meant Josh and his family were able to close a painful chapter of their military life. To provide additional support to those who care for service members as they recover, NVLSP in September 2024 launched the Family Caregiver Assistance Program. It was implemented with support of a Skadden Fellowship.
The Family Caregiver Assistance Program is a program housed within NVLSP that works on a bunch of different tracks to try to improve access to VA's family caregiver benefits. That includes direct representation, strategic litigation, info sharing across organizations that work with veterans across the whole country, as well as some advocacy. We try to reduce accessibility barriers to the program, however and wherever we can. One of the signature injuries of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan is traumatic brain injury. And due to advancements in military technology and medical care as well, a lot of veterans are coming home having survived traumatic brain injuries that previous generations of veterans simply would not have made it through. So they're coming home and they need extensive services, and they are trying to learn to cope with both the physical ramifications of these injuries And that's a huge adjustment for the veteran. And it is such a tremendous difference for that veteran to have access to a family caregiver to support them through that adjustment.
NVLSP's Family Caregiver Assistance Program is a natural extension of our existing work for caregivers.
Just this past year, NVLSP won a pretty significant victory related to VA's caregiver programs. For the first decade of these programs' existence, the VA insisted that anybody denied these benefits simply could not appeal. And NVLSP, with coalition partners, recently won at the federal circuit level, and the federal circuit affirmed in a case called Bodette the right of veterans and caregivers to appeal denials of caregiver benefits.
Since its inception, NVLSP has secured more than $5.6 billion in benefits for veterans and their families, all without charging a fee.
We have been representing veterans of all eras for a long time, but of course we were created over 40 years ago, and so our focus then was on Vietnam veterans as well as Korean era and World War II. But as time goes on, of course, other wars have arisen with other types of problems, and so we're not limited to veterans of Vietnam. Our focus is on veterans of all eras.